Hello, I'm Scott Sinclair, Practice Director with the Enterprise Strategy Group, and I'm pleased to be joined by Scott Delandy from Dell Technologies. For those of you who may not be familiar with the Enterprise Strategy Group, we're an IT analyst firm with a heavy focus on strategy and research. And I'm excited for our conversation today. We're going to discuss technology, and I'm going to share some of that research with you. But first, let's get to my colleague, Scott Delandy. Scott, why don't you introduce yourself for the audience?
The other Scott.
The other Scott, yeah, exactly.
Hi. Yeah, thanks, Scott. So, hi, I'm Scott Delandy. I am an engineering technologist, and I am part of Dell's Infrastructure Solutions Group. I come to Dell from the EMC merger from several years ago. So between EMC and now Dell, I've been with the organization for actually going over 33 years. So I've been doing this for quite some time. So super psyched to be here today and to talk about some of the things that we're hearing from customers and some of the things that are really important as part of the latest launch that we have around some of the technology sides of things.
Absolutely, Scott. And I'm excited to really dive into that expertise from your 33 years of experience. One of the things that I mentioned at the beginning is we at the Enterprise Strategy Group, we're an IT analyst firm. We do a ton of research. So I'm going to pepper in some of our stats, some of the things we're seeing to provide some color commentary here. I think at a high level, it's important to understand for everyone in our audience to truly understand that every business is digital. And effectively managing IT operations is critical to capturing revenue opportunity. And as a result, many IT organizations are going through some major transformations in order to accelerate growth. And as a result, they face a range of challenges to do so successfully. So a couple of quick stats here. First off, nearly every organization is under pressure to move faster. So we see in our research, 91% of organizations have had to accelerate their operations over the last 3 years. Now, the challenge, though, is as much as we want to move faster, we all face pressures in other areas. So near-term pressures in costs, cyber threats, ransomware, power and sustainability concerns all add complexity and risk as we try to accelerate operations. And in fact, often those can have the opposite effect where it actually slows down operations. And organizations are spending to address this. So for example, what we also see in our research is some of the areas of top 5 biggest spend in IT and cloud for 2023 is 35% of organizations say cybersecurity, 28% say cyber resiliency, and another 28 say, look, adding or adhering to regulatory compliance is among our top 5 spending initiatives. So organizations are spending to mitigate risk. At the same time, they have to accelerate operations. But I'll turn it over to you, Scott Delandy. What are you hearing from your customers?
Yeah, it's very consistent to the research that you folks have over at ESG. And I do spend a ton of time talking to customers. And I think the key sort of theme for the last several years has been that more and more organizations realize that they really are in the information business, right? That is, kind of the key thing that they look at as far as how they're going to be able to drive more value to their customers, how they're going to be able to provide more differentiation in terms of the markets that they participate in, and really looking at, how do they extract more and more out of that, really their most important asset within their organization, and that's their information. And I would say kind of at a high level, I like to keep things simple. So I think in things of 3. And, thinking about this and getting ready for this discussion, I would say kind of the top 3 sort of challenges that I think people are faced with today. Number 1 is security, right? No surprise there. I think, given the world that we live in and the increased amount of threats and the increased types of threats, right? Before it was, securing the perimeter and keeping the bad guys out, right? That's clearly not acceptable today because you've got to assume that the bad guys are going to find a way in. So how do you mitigate the risk to the business? And how do you really speed up the ability to go ahead and find, out that somebody has actually compromised your security and they're able to get access to the information? So how do you reduce the time to discovery and really improve the ability to recover from those types of attacks? So security, definitely number 1. Number 2 is around automation, right? I think, if you look at the infrastructure itself over, many years, just the administrative effort required to manage the infrastructure has gotten much easier. So we've gone from, multiple panes of glass down to, in some cases, a single pane of glass as far as management is concerned. But now, people are looking to take it to the next step and making that infrastructure more self-managing. So going from, a single pane of glass to no pane of glass, right? Having everything kind of fully automated and really, really being able to improve the efficiency in terms of how that infrastructure and their information is being managed. The third thing, and it's a quote unquote hot topic, right, is what's happening around power and energy costs. So I think lots of IT organizations have more and more initiatives that are being spun up around how do they go in and how do they reduce their carbon footprint, how do they reduce their energy spend, how do they meet all of their growth requirements in terms of the infrastructure that they're deploying, but doing it in a more efficient way so they're not blowing out more racks in data centers and consuming more power, more footprint. So how do they do that but do it in a much more efficient way?
Yeah, and I like how you broke that down in those three areas. And let's start off the conversation really diving into cyber resiliency and the importance of improving your cybersecurity. So something else that we see, I mentioned a little bit, 28% of IT organizations say in our research that they have cyber resiliency as a top 5 area of IT spend for 2023. Cybersecurity continues to be a top problematic area to try to in terms of skill shortages. It's tough to find talent. It's a complex field. Often talent is very expensive. We also find that, even though organizations have made considerable investments in terms of to beef up their cyber resiliency, the analogy I always like to use is, the idea of that home security system. I think for years, many people were leaving their doors unlocked or relatively unlocked. And now we have not only locks on all the doors, but we have the early warning systems and everything else, but still people are getting through. And we see, for example, 18% of organizations reported disruptive attack in the last 12 months. So attacks definitely continue to get through. And this is an area where folks like Dell, where you guys are putting tremendous innovation in terms of helping address these challenges. And I'd love to dive into that a little bit. Where are you guys investing? Where are you innovating to help address the challenges of cyber resiliency?
Yeah, I think the clients that we're working with are looking at Dell in kind of the portfolio of solutions that we can bring to the table to try and develop really a kind of this concept of a zero trust infrastructure, right? And in order to do that, it's an overall strategy. It's not a set of individual kind of point products that get deployed in different areas. It really becomes more of an overall strategy around how do you build that and provide that from an end-to-end perspective. And so, we Dell as an organization has been innovating in this space for multiple decades. If you go back, right, there's been some really unique things that we introduced many years ago as a result of working with our clients and kind of understanding what their security needs have been, and we continue to work with them. I think in this latest release, there's some really important capabilities that our users are going to be very excited about. The first one is the work that we're doing around anomaly detection, right? So again, when a hacker is able to get into the environment and maybe able to access some of the applications and begin to inject some malware into the environment, and there's a number of recent examples where this is going on kind of in real time. How do you shorten the window to discover that type of a breach, and then how do you put the steps in business back and not have to take months, weeks, or even days in order to be able to do that. So at Dell, we first introduced some of our capabilities around anomaly detection in a release from actually a couple of years ago. And we've been innovating in how we do that. And kind of the first pass was to we'll geek out a little bit here for the storage folks, kind of taking a look at, changes in reducibility patterns, right? So one of the things that we see is that if someone's going to inject malware into the environment, they're going to go in and try and encrypt parts of the application in order to kind of, lock users out from being able to get at their data. And so what we've been doing around some of our sophisticated analytics and telemetry that we've built into the platform is basically kind of watching for those types of things and providing proactive alerts if we see unexpected changes in the reducibility of a particular data set. What we're introducing in this release is kind of building on that. We're not just looking at changes in reducibility, we're actually looking at changes in access patterns. So if we're kind of building up a history of the data sets that are being accessed and kind of what's been going on under the covers, and we start to see some variations in terms of those access patterns, we now have the ability to report those types of changes. So that helps users, again, really reduce that window of discovery, because now, because of the way the technology works, we're really doing this in almost real time. So as those access patterns begin to change, we're able to give users the ability to go in and see those types of things, and then be able to determine, is this just somebody doing something out of the ordinary, or is this a real security threat? Is this some type of breach? So I think that that's important. The second thing that we're introducing, and again, years ago you would have never thought this possible, but it's actually something that's becoming more of a threat, is the introduction of what we call a cryptographic ignition key, right? And what this means is that when we have a storage array in an environment, we have an encryption key that's created for that particular storage array that would prevent the array from being able to be turned on or come online unless it authenticated up against that encryption key. And really the use case for that is to prevent the physical threat, the physical theft of that particular storage asset. And again, years ago, you had this big, humongous rack that weighed several hundred pounds, and generally, people were going to notice somebody coming in with a forklift and moving that thing out. So not a big threat then, but because of the densities that we're seeing now, you're talking multiple petabytes of mission critical information stored in a couple U in terms of the rack space to do that. So it is becoming more and more of a threat. So we've had users say, hey, how do we make sure that somebody doesn't come in and remove that array, and now this thing's out in the wild and people can access that information? So that's a second thing that's part of the release. Third, and there's a lot of other security features, but I guess if I had to pick a third one, support for a lot of the certifications that a lot of users are being asked to adhere to, as far as their whether internal or external compliance needs. So things like TLS 1.3 support is becoming a critical thing. This is kind of the year of where people are going to be required to start to support the new TLS 1.3 spec, because of some of the improvements in overall security that was introduced over those previous versions. So again, security top of mind for many of our users, certainly top of mind from a Dell perspective, from our product management folks, from our engineering development folks, right straight through. So there's a constant amount of work being done in that area. And I think what you're seeing here is some really good examples of how we're keeping up in that space and introducing capabilities that our users are really going to be able to take advantage of.
Yeah, thanks for walking us through all the detail on that, Scott. I think, my takeaway, and I think this is something we see in our research when it comes to cyber resiliency, it's a continuously moving target, right? It's not a checkbox that you can say, oh, we have that solved. The bad actors are always finding new ways to innovate. And so thankfully, folks like you guys at Dell are finding also new ways to innovate to provide greater resiliency. I want to shift gears, though, to automation, that second element, right? One of the things I talked about in our research is this near universal need to accelerate operations. When we ask people, okay, how are you going to do that? The most common response is, look, we're going to increase our adoption of automation and AI ops. 45% of organizations saying that they're going to do that. And the bulk of organizations, when they look at where they're going to deploy automation, are often focused on premises within the data center. Now, when we investigate why people want to automate, I mean, it does sound obvious. We need to go faster. But often what's interesting out of that is 46% said, look, we got to reduce the burden on IT. And I compare that to 30% of organizations saying, look, we need to accelerate the developer experience. Now, why is that important? Well, first, you need to do both. But the fact that more people are saying we got to reduce the burden on IT, it means that if you're listening to this now, chances are your IT staff is already overburdened. That organizations, automation is not just an opportunity to do more. It is something that you have to do to basically keep pace. One of the ways organizations are doing that is by looking at the API capabilities of their infrastructure. 43% have API capabilities as one of the most important factors they do when looking at a storage provider. An additional 36% have it as a differentiator. This is something that is absolutely imperative because we also see 76% of storage admins saying, look, they're under pressure to add new responsibilities to their job. Mm-hmm. Not only do we need to move faster, we're under pressure to do more for the business. And for that, we need storage technology like PowerMax to be more automated. So, Scott, let me turn it back to you. How is Dell unleashing the power of automation with PowerMax?
Yeah, so again, this is an area that, Dell and specifically within PowerMax, we've been heavily focused on for many, many years. And you've seen just remarkable improvements in terms of the automation and really the user experience over the last several years. And it's definitely an area that we still continue to really focus in on heavily because there's some cool things that we're actually doing in this space. So you mentioned AI ops, right? Which is basically, at a high level kind of self-managing infrastructure, right? This is your, Space Odyssey 2001, HAL sort of, the machines are taking over, right? Depending on what side you sit on, that can be kind of scary. But I think when you look at, how we're deploying it and making it really practical for our users, there's a tremendous amount of value. And I'll give you some examples. So one of the things that we've been developing over the last couple of releases, and there's some new things that we're introducing in this release, is kind of this ability to leverage the AI ops piece and really provide more automation around self-management, right? So what does that mean, right? What we're doing is we're looking at the array and trying to understand what are the kind of the most common things that we see happen that users have to respond to and kind of go in and fix from just an administrative perspective, right? So I'll give you some examples. Things like capacity breaches, the array is starting to fill up, performance. Right, you set the array up, you went ahead and you connected your host, and now all of a sudden you're seeing some areas where there's some performance imbalances. From a storage array perspective itself, if you're a large environment and you have multiple arrays, where do I land these new applications, right? I've got multiple storage arrays out there, and I need to provision more capacity and more performance. What's the best physical frame to lay that application out, right? And the tools that we're currently delivering today really help users be able to do that much more effectively and to do it in a much more automated way. And so again, I'll give you an example from a capacity breach perspective, right? A few releases ago, we introduced this ability so that if you start to run out of capacity space on the storage array, we would give you an alert and say, hey, here's an alert, you're running out of space. Here's a list of storage groups, storage devices that, they haven't had IO run up against them in 60 days. Here's a bunch of copies, snapshots that you've made that were terminated, and they're just kind of hanging out there. They don't really belong to anything. But we would give you like the whole list of things that says, here's everything that you can do to go ahead and clean up. Have a nice day, right? In this latest release, what we're doing is just taking kind of the list of recommendations to now actually giving you the ability to automatically do the remediation, where now the system comes in and says, hey, here are the things that we've identified as areas that are kind of low-hanging fruit for us to clean up and get you back this space. Click OK, and we'll go ahead and we'll do that for you, and we'll get you out of that issue that you're running into where you're running out of capacity, right? So making it very easy for users to go ahead and do that and not have to go in and look things one by one and figure out, what are the things that I can do here in order to free up that space. Same thing with performance, right? So I've laid, my fabric out. I've got, in the PowerMax space, sometimes thousands of applications running on hundreds of hosts. And now I'm starting to see some imbalances within the fabric, right? So again, in the past, we would say, hey, here are some things that you can do and give you a list of possible recommendations that you could go ahead and apply, to now where we're coming in and we're giving you the ability to automatically remediate, saying, hey, here are the paths. We're going to go ahead and we're going to realign these paths. We're going to change these settings. We're going to present these initiators over on these ports or whatever it is. But now the system has the ability to do that, right? And then the last piece of that is the mobility. Right, being able to move things, not just knowing where to land an application, which is nice, right? Where's my headroom? Where do I have free space and available performance resources to put these new workloads on? But now that I have an environment and I've got one array that's 80% full and another array that's 20% full, how do I move an application from one array to the other and do that completely seamlessly to the users, to the host, to everything that sits above that, right? So that's part of our dynamic data mobility capabilities that we're introducing in this release, that, again, automate the process to do that, makes it very, very simple, but does it in a way that's completely non-disruptive, being able to move things from one frame to another, with most of the policies that are associated with that application or that storage group also moving with it. So not having to just copy the data, but taking all of the metadata and the attributes and kind of the service levels that are associated with that application and moving that from one frame to another. It's actually really, really cool stuff for the folks that kind of like to geek out and see how easy these things can be, especially if you've been in this space for years and you're kind of familiar with kind of the traditional way of moving it. It's a real simple process, and I think the users that I've spoken to that have kind of looked at it and actually have had exposure to it, they really like the direction that we're going within this space.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things you brought up at the beginning, right, is which I don't hear very often. I used to back in the day, but concerns over automation. What is that my job? I mean, bottom line is, everyone I talk to, especially I've talked to a number of Dell customers about some of the innovation that you've done, is that first off, the reaction's all positive. Often it's, hey, this actually allowed me to do more fun, interesting parts of my job and automated the mundane. And as a result, people have been able to have more successful and more rewarding careers as a result of an improved automation. And at the end of the day, manual operations at the scale and pace people want to go, it's just not sustainable in the long term. You have to embrace automation. I love all the stuff you guys are doing at PowerMax.
It also really impacts the serviceability side of things as well, because when we take a look at the typical service requests that get open from customers, you see a pattern, right? Where 80% of the service calls that we get are related to 20% of things. It's kind of the 80-20 rule, right? So if you can build the intelligence into the infrastructure to look at that, that top 20%, right? And really be able to kind of hone in on that and help the array kind of walk the user through what to do next, that greatly reduces the number of service incidents that a user has to kind of track and manage and kind of deal with. So I think that's a big piece of the overall strategy as well. It's not just the admin side of things when things are going well, but what happens when now I start to run into an issue, and how do I have the array walk the user through, hey, here's what you can do in terms of the steps to kind of clean this up or fix this, right? So definitely cool stuff there.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm glad you brought that up. Let's shift gears to that the third leg of the stool, energy efficiency, sustainability. Yes. One of the things, the first two things, cyber resiliency and the need for automation, they've been persistent. They've been building over years. You could argue the same thing about energy efficiency and sustainability, but really it's become a much larger area of focus just over the past several months and quarters. So some of the things we're seeing in our research is obviously sustainability is becoming more and more important. 93% of organizations have started incorporating ESG, or environmental, social, and governance, not to be confused with the enterprise strategy group, which is us, but environmental, social, and governance elements into their request for proposals, RFPs, for new infrastructure. 87% have said, look, an internal ESG sustainability program has accelerated the replacement timeframe for existing infrastructure. And this is not just in Europe. This is true both in Europe and in North America. organizations are trying to get ahead of what they perceive might be regulatory requirements down the road, but also trying to be proactive as they think about scale. Because as we think about the power envelope within our environment, as well as the cost of power, this is something that plays a huge role in scalability. And often as organizations think about their overall environmental, social, and governance policies, when they think about energy efficiency, often the CEO turns directly to the CIO and says, how do we reduce power in the data center? So that is becoming more and more of a priority. And to that end, Scott, how's Dell prioritizing sustainability?
Yeah, well, we've been down this path around, providing more efficiency around the storage capacity, as well as providing improvements in the density, right? In terms of, the actual storage arrays themselves. In this release, from an efficiency perspective, what we've done is we've introduced new data reduction technology. It allows us to go from, in the past, we had a 4-to-1 data reduction target, and that was actually a guarantee that Dell would provide for reducible data. And we did well in really being able to provide value associated with that 4-to-1. So if you think about it, I own 10 terabytes of physical storage, but I'm actually able to write 40 terabytes of data to that, right? So that's obviously going to have a big impact in terms of storage efficiency. In this release, that same 10 terabytes now goes up to 50 terabytes of writable effective space. So providing more efficiency just by taking advantage of the improvements that we can deliver through optimizing the data reduction technology that we have in the platform, literally being able to store more information with less infrastructure. Goodness there. In the PowerMax space, the uniqueness around the scale out architecture gives us the ability to be able to scale in multiple ways. And I think one of the newest things in this release is the ability to scale the compute nodes, which is your performance, your connectivity, your cache, without having to add additional capacity, without having to add additional storage trays, without having to add additional storage arrays themselves. So, when you look at, the storage platforms themselves today, kind of across the board from pretty much any vendor, you're in a space where you're talking, petabytes of capacity and, 2-3U in terms of the form factor to do that. And when I talk to users about kind of growth needs, what I see is they very rarely hit their heads in terms of the amount of capacity that they need to add into an existing array. They usually have way more upgradability in terms of the storage and the actual capacity. Where they hit their heads is in the performance, right? They run out of performance, and it's not because they can't add more capacity. They just can't get any more I/O through the controllers or through the nodes in that platform. So the multi-controller node architecture within PowerMax gives us the ability to expand and to be able to add that performance, to be able to add that connectivity. They basically add all of those front-end resources without having to add other things to manage, like building out additional arrays. So that's a nice advantage to have, and again, a big part of what separates the architecture of the PowerMax from many of the things that are available on the storage side. The third thing that's included in this release, and it's kind of interesting because it's one of the things that users are really interested and very excited about, and that's the introduction of our new smart PDUs, power distribution units, where we actually have incorporated real-time monitoring for power consumption, heat dissipation, all these different environmental factors, so that users can actually see exactly what's happening from a power and cooling perspective. I refer to this, I have kids, right? So I'll admit it. I refer to this as the, who left the lights on, right? Sort of a dashboard, because you look out at the infrastructure in a data center, and you have all these different frames and servers and switches and arrays and all this stuff, right? And it's really, really hard to get an accurate measurement of who's doing what from a power and cooling perspective. It's like when I ask my kid who left the light on, nobody has ever left a light on in the Delandy house, or no one has ever taken ownership of leaving the light on in the Delandy house. But I know someone's doing it, and it's sort of the same thing where, you know, somebody's consuming a lot of power in generating a lot of heat over there. I just can't figure out exactly who it is. Well, the move to these smart PDUs now gives you the ability to actually have real-time, fully accurate ways of being able to measure this, right? There are other, you know, technologies that are out there that have the ability to give you kind of estimates around power and cooling, but it's all based on spec sheet data. So there's a wide range of variability in terms of how accurate that data can be, because it depends on a lot of factors, the utilization and how things are connected. And there's just a list of things that would impact the accuracy of that. We're building this and we're integrating it directly into the cabinets themselves. It's a standard feature. You order a PowerMax today, you get a smart PDU. You have the ability to centralize the management and the reporting of that. So we actually have a dashboard that you can look at, and you can see which frames are out there, and again, be able to get that accurate measurement of the power and the environmental factors on that array. And you would think, okay, kind of a, you know, sort of nice thing to have. But the response from our users has actually been very surprising, where, you know, we would present, hey, here are the, you know, the 20 cool things that we have in this release. And almost everybody would start off with, well, tell me more about these smart PDUs. What do they do, and how do I get them, and can I upgrade the existing things? And there's all sorts of questions. So it's definitely an area of interest. So again, it resonates with the research from ESG around this becoming, again, you know, a hot topic to really, you know, things that users are actually caring about, and they find this capability, you know, a really nice thing to be able to have, and to be able to incorporate it and have it fully integrated into the storage array itself.
Oh yeah, you know, one of the you know, I mentioned in the research, but a lot of these energy efficiency, sustainability initiatives are driven from the C-suite down, right? So they have a lot of focus, a lot of visibility, and your ability to go in there with these smart PDUs and help people measure it is so valuable, because I mean, you can't improve something if you can't measure it. So
Right.
that's what organizations are looking for, and it's great innovation in terms of what you're doing at PowerMax, in addition to the efficiency, right? I mean, given where we are in terms of the scalability of these operations and just that need for sustainability, that comes down to being as efficient as humanly possible. And that's something PowerMax has always been good at. And it's great to see you guys continuing to innovate on that front. You know, as I kind of want to summarize these big three, though, Scott, that you walked us through, and kind of think about, you know, how that relates to what we see from at an industry level. You know, the bottom line is the role of technology is just to make life easier, especially for business. And with so much pressure to keep pace, IT decision makers need to focus on more than just simplicity and consolidation. I mean, those are important, but and it's something that PowerMax provides. But we also need to be able to ensure that we can meet our sustainability goals and be incredibly efficient to support scalability as we scale these environments moving forward. Data services is not, you know, it's not a you know, a stationary target, right? That's always going to continue to move. We also got to improve automation as we think about that as well, because it's not just efficiency of power usage, it's also efficiency of personnel usage. We have to allow the human capital of a business to maximize its capabilities, but also accelerate delivery of services to the rest of the business. And then at the same time, we always have to be working to improve cyber resiliency to minimize business risk. And to do all that, you know, frankly, no one can do this alone. You have to work with the right partners, and it can't be done within one system. It has to be done across the breadth of technology. So you have to work with the right partners that can cover a breadth of offerings to help simplify everything. And that ties in, Scott, to everything you guys are doing at Dell Technologies and with PowerMax and beyond. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Sinclair, the other Scott. You know, this is a great opportunity to come in and talk to folks about some of the cool things that we're doing in this space. You know, the storage market, the storage infrastructure part of Dell's organization is still a very strategic part of our overall business, and as you can see, you know, very much an area that we continue to invest in heavily from a development and from an innovation perspective. So this is, you know, yet another release with a whole bunch of cool things included in it, and you know, this is, in many cases, improvements in things that we've been doing, as well as some net new capabilities that we're introducing. And stay tuned for more, because we're not letting up, and we have a lot of cool things that we're working on within engineering. So great to talk to you guys, and then thank you again for your time.
Yeah, Scott, this has been great. It's been a great conversation. Thank you, Scott Delandy. And I look forward to hearing more about what Dell's doing in the future to help IT organizations.
Sounds good. Thank you.